Welcome to the Epic Bible Stories channel. Have you ever heard of a blood type that seems to defy human origin? It's a mystery that puzzles scientists, sparks theories, and raises a profound question. Could we be carrying a trace of something supernatural within our bodies? We're talking about the Rh-negative factor, a rare and enigmatic blood type surrounded by intense speculation. Where did it come from? Why does a portion of humanity carry something so distinct in their blood? In this video, we'll dive deep into this genetic investigation, explore shocking hypotheses, and uncover why many consider Rh-negative blood to be a case of non-human DNA. Get ready. What you're about to discover might change the way you view the very origins of humanity. The enigma in our veins. In the depths of what we know about the human body lies a mystery that cuts across biology, spirituality, and ancient records. It is a silent enigma that runs through our veins and is rarely explored with the seriousness it deserves. This is a variation in human blood that, beyond its medical implications, sparks unease, theories, and questions that push the boundaries of conventional science. This genetic trait, found in only a small fraction of the global population, has captured the attention of doctors, researchers, theologians, historians, and thinkers across various fields. Its rarity is just the starting point for a series of reflections on identity, ancestry, and even possible links to spiritual dimensions or long-forgotten ancient narratives. To understand what makes Rh-negative blood so special, and for some, so disturbing, we need to go back to the basics of human biology. The science behind the mystery, the term Rh factor, comes from studies conducted with rhesus monkeys, where scientists discovered a specific protein on the surface of red blood cells. This protein, known as the D antigen, became essential for classifying blood types, especially in transfusion medicine and in understanding certain pregnancy complications. Most of the world's population carries this protein and are known as Rh positive. However, a minority lacks this antigen in their blood cells, and these individuals are classified as Rh negative. It is precisely this absence that gives rise to a host of questions, both scientific and philosophical. Biologically, Rh negative blood requires specific medical attention, particularly in pregnancies, where there can be an incompatibility between the mother and baby's blood, leading to what's known as hemolytic disease of the newborn. In such cases, the mother's immune system may attack the baby's blood, requiring careful medical intervention. However, it's outside the laboratory that this genetic trait takes on even more complex dimensions. An ancestral marker or something more. Some see Rh-negative blood not just as a biological peculiarity, but as an ancestral marker, a link to ancient peoples mentioned in sacred texts or shrouded in mythologies. In more daring interpretations, this condition is seen as a possible indication that part of humanity might have different, or at least not fully understood, origins. Theories range from alternative evolutionary explanations to speculations involving lost civilizations, ancient royal bloodlines, and even visitors from other worlds. While these hypotheses lack scientific proof, they feed the curiosity of millions who seek answers to questions that mainstream science has yet to fully explain. Interestingly, historical documents and archaeological records suggest that some prominent ancient figures, such as certain Egyptian pharaohs, may have had Rh-negative blood. Although this claim remains debated and lacks academic consensus, it opens the door to speculation. Could this genetic trait be linked to the ancient castes, powerful bloodlines, or even the idea of sacred blood? Through these reflections, Rh-negative blood stops being just a clinical anomaly and becomes a symbol, a possible key to unlocking deeper layers of human history, and perhaps our very identity as a species. While science continues to investigate the origins of this genetic factor, many questions remain unanswered. Why does only a small portion of the population have this blood type? Why does this condition seem to occur with higher frequency in certain regions or ethnic groups? And why do so many ancient accounts seem to associate prominent figures, kings, prophets, and spiritual leaders with specific blood characteristics? The Nephilim hypothesis, among the most intriguing and controversial conjectures in the study of human genetics. One theory stands out for its nearly mythological nature. The hypothesis that Rh-negative blood has a non-human origin, possibly linked to an ancestral lineage of a celestial nature, the so-called Nephilim. These beings, mentioned in ancient sources including the Hebrew Scriptures, are frequently associated with the sons of God or fallen angels, mysterious figures who allegedly transgress divine orders by intervening directly in human destiny. According to some of these speculative narratives, the Rh-negative factor did not emerge as a result of natural evolutionary processes, but was instead a trait implanted in humanity through an external intervention that occurred in remote antiquity. These theories suggest that this blood characteristic is not merely a biological peculiarity, but rather an ancestral vestige of a union between celestial and human. Lineage is a genetic marker left by beings who cross the boundaries between the spiritual and the material. Although this hypothesis lacks empirical scientific backing and remains within the realm of unproven speculation, it continues to capture the imagination of independent researchers, spiritualists, and explorers of the frontiers of human knowledge. In this context, Re-negative blood is no longer seen merely as a genetic anomaly, but as a symbolic key, one that invites us to reflect on humanity's origins and the hidden mysteries within our biological inheritance. Blending science, faith, and mythology, this line of thought inevitably leads to a domain where science, faith, and mythology intertwine. The debate transcends laboratory findings and becomes rooted in deeper questions. How much do we truly know about our own genetic history? Could certain traits in our DNA reflect events that defy rational understanding, perhaps even biological records of a pre-flood era obscured by time and sacred narratives? The Rh-negative factor thus emerges as a genetic peculiarity that fascinates precisely because of its rarity and its apparent absence among the oldest human populations, as interpreted through biblical accounts within the Judeo-Christian tradition. For example, humanity is understood as a direct creation of God, made in His image and likeness, with Adam being the original prototype of mankind. Within this framework, there would be no room for genetic alterations external to the divine plan, making the presence of Rh-negative blood a mystery worthy of attention. Modern population data further amplifies this strangeness. Approximately 85% of the world's population is Rh positive, while the remaining 15%, those with Rh-negative blood, form a statistically significant minority that remains unexplained by traditional evolutionary theories. What caused this division? Where did this trait originate? A royal bloodline? Some researchers, particularly those focused on ancient dynasties and pre-classical civilizations, point to a curious pattern. Historical records suggest that certain Egyptian pharaohs belonged to the Rh-negative blood group, a claim that, if accurate, could indicate a distinct bloodline possibly preserved with great care within royal elites. There are also reports suggesting that this same Rh-negative factor was relatively common among Incan rulers and other spiritual or political leaders from vanished cultures, raising the possibility of a bloodline selectively preserved over centuries. It is at this point that the Nephilim theory becomes particularly relevant. In the book of Genesis chapters 6-2 and 6-4, a peculiar and disturbing episode is described: the sons of God, an expression often interpreted as a reference to fallen angels, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives. From this union came forth the giants, in Hebrew, Nephilim, beings of great stature and strength, who dwelt on earth in the days before the flood. These giants were often portrayed as heroic and legendary figures, but in some Jewish and apocryphal traditions, such as the Book of Enoch, They also appear as monstrous creatures, corrupted, powerful, and intelligent, yet devoid of a pure spiritual essence that characterizes God's original creation. As hybrids, they represented a threat to the natural order established by the Creator. According to the biblical account, the presence and proliferation of these beings became unsustainable. The corruption of the flesh, understood not only in moral terms but also genetic ones, had reached such profound levels that the Creator decided to intervene drastically. In this context, the flood was not merely an act of moral judgment, but a divine attempt to purify the human lineage, to eradicate the distortion caused by this external interference in the original structure of humanity. However, even after the flood, there are indications that remnants of these lineages survived. Later accounts, both biblical and extra-biblical, mention the presence of giants in lands, such as Canaan, among them the Anakim, Rephaim, and Emim, which suggests that genetic traces of that primordial union between the sons of God and the daughters of men persisted, albeit to a lesser extent. This raises the possibility that certain genetic heritages, such as the Rh negative factor, may be linked to the residual survival of a hybrid lineage whose traces can still be detected today in small groups within the global population. Though lacking strict scientific validation, these theories continue to fuel a passionate and ongoing debate among theologians, alternative geneticists, historians, and mystical thinkers. The presence of Rh negative blood in certain royal bloodlines and its global rarity only add to the fascination surrounding this possible link to a remote past past in which Earth may have been the stage for interactions that challenge modern conceptions of reality, spirituality, and human nature. The legacy of a corrupted genetics, the notion of a corrupted genetics, the legacy of a celestial intervention that altered humanity's natural course, has been the subject of intense debate, both in theological circles and in sectors of alternative science. The suggestion that rare genetic traits, such as the Rh negative factor, may be remnants of that ancient corruption, provokes a series of deep questions. What is the true origin of these traits? Are they linked to pre-flood events described in the scriptures? Or are they simply common genetic variations interpreted through a mythological lens? The truth is that even beyond the scope of biblical narratives, similar stories appear across cultures worldwide, spanning continents and millennia. Ancient traditions speak of superior beings who came from the sky's gods, angels, celestial spirits, and united with human women, giving rise to a hybrid offspring. These accounts are not exclusive to the Judeo-Christian tradition. They repeat with striking similarity in numerous mythologies, raising the possibility that such stories may derive from a shared ancestral memory or real events reinterpreted by different cultures over time. In Greek mythology, the children of deities and mortals were known as heroes or demigods, figures like Hercules, Perseus, and Achilles, endowed with superhuman strength, immense courage, and grand destinies. In other traditions, however, these hybrid lineages were viewed with fear, described as monsters, titans, or deformed creatures, often associated with chaos and the transgression of the natural order. These beings, sometimes interpreted as fusions between the divine and the earthly, the spiritual and the carnal, proliferated in a world that preceded the great cataclysm of the flood. Echoes in ancient texts, Sumerian civilization, regarded by many historians as one of the oldest and most enigmatic in known history, offers revealing clues. In their clay tablets, there are accounts of beings known as the Anunnaki, entities that descended from the heavens and interfered directly in human affairs. The Sumerian texts not only describe these beings as the creators of humanity, but also portray them as gods who walked among men, ruling over them and imparting knowledge. For some modern scholars, these figures are analogous to the sons of God mentioned in Genesis, fallen angels who took on physical form to corrupt the original creation. In the Book of Enoch, an apocryphal text revered in various Eastern Christian traditions, and by scholars of antiquity. This narrative is expanded. There, the Watchers, a group of angels assigned to observe Earth rebel, descend to the world and take human wives. From this union came the Nephilim, gigantic, wise, and dangerous beings who quickly dominated the earth, ushering in an era of unprecedented spiritual decline and moral corruption. From this perspective, the gods of ancient mythologies were not true divinities, but fallen angels masquerading as deities to deceive humanity. The connection between these entities and the Rh- factor emerges from a symbolic, and for some, literal, association between the unique genetic traits of this blood group and the characteristics attributed to these hybrid beings. There are theories suggesting that the Nephilim had a distinct appearance from the populations of their time. Some describe them as having blonde hair, light eyes, and pale skin, a profile reminiscent of ancient Nordic peoples. Other versions, however, mention red-haired beings with blue eyes and dark skin, revealing a phenotypic diversity that defies standardized description. This raises an interesting hypothesis, that the Nephilim, being the result of a hybridization between spiritual entities, and humans from various regions and ethnic groups, may have inherited diverse traits depending on the peoples with whom they interacted. In this way, the genetic traces of their existence could be scattered among many cultures and groups rather than tied to a single ethnic origin. Such a view opens the door to considering Rh- blood as a marker of a transcultural lineage, one dispersed across the globe and preserved in a fragmented form. This idea, deeply rooted in biblical interpretations and ancient texts, proposes that Rh- blood is ultimately a corrupted angelic inheritance, a genetic signature of the fall, a tangible remnant of the forbidden's union between heaven and earth. In other words, it wouldn't merely be a random genetic mutation, but rather an element foreign to the original biological blueprint of humanity. The unanswered questions. The inevitable question then is, if Rh- is not a trait common to most of humanity, and if it doesn't appear to derive directly from the Adamic lineage as described in Scripture, where did it come from? According to these theories, the answer lies with the fallen angels' spiritual entities who, by assuming material form, disrupted the world's genetic balance. Curiously, despite the depth and implications of this subject, it is rarely explored in depth within traditional media. On platforms like YouTube, for example, only a limited number of content creators focus on the connection between Rh- blood and the Nephilim from a biblical perspective. Many of these materials are labeled as conspiracy theories or face resistance for tackling spiritually controversial topics that challenge both mainstream science and institutional religion. Moreover, the topic appears to be wrapped in a veil of silence, a kind of modern taboo that avoids confronting the public with the possibility that our genetic history may contain elements that transcend biology. Some view this as a form of veiled censorship, driven by fear of opening space for explanations that challenge current scientific and religious paradigms. Still, despite this topic's marginalization in mainstream discourse, the intrigue persists. Human curiosity, fueled by historical gaps, fragments of ancient texts, and unexplained genetic patterns, continues to seek answers. The rarity of Rh- blood, coupled with the theories surrounding its origin, invites us to reflect on deeper issues involving spirituality, history, and genetics. Could this blood type be a mark of something greater? A remnant of ancient events beyond our understanding? Or, on the other hand, is it simply a genetic peculiarity that, due to its rarity, has given rise to speculation and mystery over the years? The fact remains that this topic continues to spark curiosity and divide opinions, fueling both scientific discussion and spiritual interpretation. And you, what do you think about Rh- blood and its possible origin? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts. May God bless you all, and we'll see you soon.